It's Wednesday. You all know what that means. It is time for another episode of the Life in the Movies podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This week, we're going to do a bit of a take two because, well, Mother Nature kind of put the kibosh on our plans for a little musical celebration. We're not going to be singing or anything, though Jake's got that more than covered between the two of us. But we're going to be talking about movie musicals in light of, say, Mean Girls coming out and being a musical, but not really marketed as such. It seems like there's a little, I don't know what's the word, like say, little,
Marketing manipulation.
yeah, let's go with that. So, this is as good an opportunity as any to talk about some great movie musicals over the years, and we will be covering The Punisher, Season 1, Episode 4. But first, got to introduce my co-host Jacob Martin, which is slightly less cold over there from when we were recording last week, I hope.
Yeah, last week we got bombarded with some snow and we had a power outage. That's why we didn't have an episode last week, but things have gotten better. The power's back. It's gotten a little warmer. Still a little bit of snow right at the house, but it's not too bad. I'm also recovering from a cold I've had over the weekend, but still pretty good. Still pretty good.
Well, I was going to say when we were recording last week, I was going to plug the Discussing DreamWorks episode we were going to do on Monsters vs. Aliens, but by the time this episode goes live, it will have already happened. So go to Jacob's channel and watch us talk about Monsters vs. Aliens. The stream is long over, but the replay is still up, so go check that out if you are so inclined. But Jacob, do you want to dive into some things you've watched lately?
Um, the real big thing I've been watching lately, I'll share what I said last week when we attempted to film. I've been watching the Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus. At the time of this stream, we are 6 episodes in. I think there's only two left at this point, and I have really been enjoying this show. Now, for context, I read the books when they were pretty big. I think this was around the time I was in middle or high school. Actually, it was in middle school. I remember now when I read these books. And I remember when the first movie came out. And for me, you know, I enjoyed it at the time because it was cool that we got Percy Jackson on the big screen. But in hindsight, when you look back, it was not a good adaptation of Percy Jackson. The big thing that they botched was casting the characters because Percy Jackson's supposed to be 12. They cast, I think, a 30-year-old, making him look like a 16-year-old. And it was kind of weird when the character's supposed to come of age when he's already of age in the movies. It's like, what are you doing? And you wonder why they stopped after two movies because yeah, they went off the rails. They ticked off a lot of fans. I think with the Rick Riordan, the author of the books, being hands on in this series and him being actually a screenwriter for a lot of the episodes. Yeah, this is as good of a Percy Jackson show as you're going to get, as good of an adaptation as you're going to get. And we haven't even finished season one yet. I have been thoroughly enjoying all 6 of these episodes. I think they've got the casting down well for our lead characters, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover. I think it's got some great production value to it for a TV show. I've been thoroughly enjoying how they've been doing the Greek mythology on the show, how they're placing it in modern day. It's really fascinating how they're pulling that off. There's been some good guest stars along the way. Lin Manuel Miranda made an appearance in the most recent episode. It was cool seeing him show up in this world. And all around, I think it's been a highly enjoyable show. It's getting great viewership. I'm hoping we get more seasons real soon. I hope they pull off season one, of course. Season one is based off of the first book, The Lightning Thief. And just from what I've seen so far, it is doing a much better job of telling that story. and TV show form than what the movie tried to do in less than 2 hours.
Am I correct in assuming that Lin-Manuel Miranda has something to do with the sequence where they get trapped in I can't remember what to call it, but it's like they go into this casino and it's like they're stuck there. Well, it feels
Yeah,
like an hour, but it's like for like a week.
yeah, he is in that episode, and he plays the character Hermes.
That's who I meant, or not who I meant, but I figured considering that that's mostly musical related, I figured he might have something to do with that.
Yeah, he is in that episode, and I enjoyed seeing him in the show.
I was going to ask you if this season just covered the first book and you answered my question for me. I thought that was a pretty wise decision from the sound of it. Just tackle one book at a time because there is a lot that they can do with this show. There is quite a few books in that series. So I think I've been quite busy with the stuff that I've been watching lately, but I will go out of my way to watch this show because I've been hesitant because of how the movies were. And I don't want to go too super duper harsh. Logan Lerman is very talented, and so is like Sean Bean and Uma Thurman. So the cast was good, but again, it was just some of the choices were just very weird. Like you were talking about, like Logan Lerman must have been in like his mid-20s when that movie came out, or at least close to it. And he's supposed to be 16, and I thought the cast of Smallville looked old for their age. But bizarre choices, but it seems like from what you've been telling me, the Disney Plus show seems to be doing something right with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up, I started watching Echo, the newest Marvel show. I've only seen the first two episodes. I think they dropped all of those episodes at once for some reason. Uh, so far, I'm intrigued, considering this was a character. She was a side character from the Hawkeye series, getting her own show. I wasn't the biggest fan of that character in Hawkeye. I'm actually enjoying the tone of this series. For one, it has a TVMA rating. It's got that rating mainly for brutal violence, and I'm enjoying that aspect of things. I'm glad that it's taking itself seriously and it's not like goofy and super jokey. I like. It's cool seeing. I think it's more in tone with like the Marvel Netflix shows that we've been covering, like Daredevil and The Punisher, some of those type of shows, which is actually pretty cool. When I don't know if you've read this, Ryan, they've actually confirmed that the Marvel Netflix shows like The Defenders, Punisher, Daredevil, Luke Cage, they're officially MCU canon now. They've been officially canonized. So
Yeah,
it's
I did read that.
which I think that was a smart decision. I think right now, I hope they're not. It's not going to be like some of the other Marvel Disney Plus shows where it starts off strong and ends with a whimper. I feel like it feels like they're trying to stretch a movie's worth of story into a show, just from what I've seen in two episodes, and so I do have some concerns about how it's going to end. But I do like the setup so far. It's got some good action. I like that it's more street level. There's a really cool fight that has Charlie Cox as Daredevil in it. But so far the jury's undecided on whether it's a show worth watching or not.
I've heard mixed things about Echo. I know for probably for the sake of this show, I'm probably gonna have to watch it if we're gonna review it. But I've heard mixed things. But if you're intrigued by it, then I'm gonna take your recommendation on
Yeah.
it.
But I would have to say, just from the first episode, uh, I would suggest watching the Hawkeye series first because that introduces the character, and I think you get more context. The Echo show does a good job of setting some things up, but the Hawkeye show puts things in full perspective that you wouldn't get if you didn't watch the show first.
Got it. Because I haven't actually seen most of those shows because they just came out all at once, and it was just just like right in your face. But I'm thinking I'm gonna have to catch up eventually.
Yeah.
But just for the sake of time, I'll breeze through some of the ones that I've been watching because it's been quite a bit, but I'll just streamline some. So for the Road to Godzilla X Kong, as of this recording, I have made it up to Godzilla versus Hedorah in my viewing, and we're getting into more of the mixed bag stuff in terms of Godzilla because Destroy All Monsters, which that review is currently up on the channel, I thought was a lot of fun. All Monsters Attack is basically a clip show. It's a clip show wrapped in an anti-bullying PSA. Now, I am not saying that having an anti-bullying messaging in your movie is wrong. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that it's sandwiched in between Godzilla beating up a monster, and not even Godzilla even being there. It's shameless stock footage from Ebirah Horror of the Deep and Destroy All Monsters and God and Son of Godzilla. So it feels like you're watching the same movie, or at least I was. I felt like I was watching those movies over again. The only thing that is like even redeemable is that the movie is an hour and 9 minutes long, so it's not even that big of a time investment. And then you got Godzilla versus Hedorah, which, to best describe Hedorah, he's basically made up of sludge and basically the pollution in the ocean. Like ocean pollution, sludge, crap, and everything that's been cast into the sea becomes sentient and fights Godzilla. Uh, it's about as deep as you might imagine it is. And it has a message of, save the planet, which again, not necessarily saying the message is wrong. I guess my problem is that this is somehow the most over the top version. This is the most over the top Showa era Godzilla movie of them all so far. Because there is a scene where literally Godzilla flies and he doesn't like grow wings or anything, but he uses his atomic breath to fly. And the music just combined with it's like dun 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 and I'm just like what am I watching right it's like we're at the point now where Godzilla has just become a parody of himself at this point.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm just sitting there waiting to myself. I'm saying to myself, I hear Mechagodzilla is good. I hear Mechagodzilla is good because I got this. Hedorah is now done. Godzilla versus Gigan is up next. And then after that is Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, which I've heard nothing but good things about. So I'm just like trudging through this mediocre stuff before finally getting to the other side. But yeah,
So,
it's
question. Which
definitely
is the
Godzilla is
Godzilla
worse.
movie? Which is the Godzilla movie where Godzilla does that extended long jump kick where he's like,
That's actually, I believe, Godzilla versus Gigan. Let me take a look. I believe it is versus Gigan. Let me just confirm that.
because I have seen that clip before. Like,
It is Oh, actually, it's Godzilla versus Megalon, which is the one before Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And that
okay.
movie is pretty silly too from the clips I've seen. It's got It's got Godzilla. It's got Jet Jaguar, which was a kaiju literally invented by a child. Yes, really. And at one time, it was supposed to be King Kong in a robot suit. I
Oh, what?
kid you not.
Now, I will say, I watched your review of Attack All Monsters, the one that you dropped today at the time of this recording. And
Hmm.
when you describe it as nothing more than a clip show, I'm like, why is that a good idea?
It's not.
It gave
Never.
me flashbacks to when I went through the Pink Panther series. They did that one Pink Panther movie that came out after Peter Sellers died, and so they just made a movie based on deleted scenes from past Pink Panther movies that weren't used. And when they used all that up, it was pretty much a glorified clip show. And it was the intention was there, but the execution was poor.
Yeah, that's from what I've heard as well. And to wrap things up for me for the 1999 project, I watched Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century, which is a Disney Channel original movie. I believe it was one of the first, if my memory serves me right. It starred Raven Simone in one of her first roles with Disney, and she would go on to do pretty big things with them, not only being one quartet, one quarter of the Cheetah Girls, but also having her own show, That's So Raven. So she would go on to do big things there. The movie I thought was fine for what it was. I'm not going into this thinking, oh, DComs are going to suck. Like I'm keeping an open mind. But I thought this one it was kind of weird because it takes place in 2049. And I've seen Blade Runner 2049, and this is not the 2049 that like Blade Runner shows it as. They say this language like when something is like a big deal, they say it's a big magna deal. And I'm just like, who says that? Like, especially not in the future. But the main star of the movie is Kirsten Storms, who would go on to be a voice in the Kim Possible movies, So the Drama, and A Stitch in Time. And the Xenon movies would end up becoming a trilogy. So not only did we get Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, but we would also get Xenon the Z-quel, yes,
That's bad.
and Xenon Z3. So So this would become like a trilogy of the Disney Channel original movies, I guess. And then I ended up watching She's All That, which is a pretty iconic late 90s like teen rom-com kinda, where it has Freddie Prinze Jr., Matthew Lillard, Rachel Lee Cook, Paul Walker, rest in peace, Kevin Pollak, Anna Paquin, Kieran Culkin, Eldon Henson, who was Foggy in the Daredevil slash Defenders show, and Usher. So this is a pretty loaded cast. There's a subplot in this movie in which Matthew Lillard is a guest on The Real World, the MTV show, and this was not produced by MTV. It was produced by Miramax of all people. And considering who created Miramax, Harvey Weinstein, there is a scene in which it is heavily implied that Paul Walker's character wants to do very bad things assault wise to Rachel Lee Cook's character, and she escapes with the use of almost like a miniature blowhorn of sorts. And it's played up for laughs. So yeah, that's certainly something. This is a pretty mediocre movie. The only thing I enjoyed about it was the soundtrack. The song Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Wiser debuted as part of this movie, and I legit love that song. And when that guitar hit, I'm like, hey, I know this song. So that's like the only thing I was like really popped for. And it's safe to know that Freddie Prinze Jr. and Matthew Lillard would go on to do much better things after this. And literally the same year that this movie came out, Paul Walker was in Varsity Blues, which I've already reviewed as part of the project. And that movie is very good, way better than She's All That. The movie operates under the impression that Rachel Lee Cook is unattractive, which she is quite the opposite. She's actually quite beautiful. It's a weird movie. That's my point. But She's All That is not one that I would recommend.
Yeah, I've heard about this movie. I've never seen it, but pretty much your take on this movie probably sounds like what I would be like watching that movie. Even watching the trailer, it's like they're picking on this nerdy girl because she's ugly, and then like, oh, she takes her glasses off and puts a dress on, and she's beautiful, and I'm like, okay, that's a weird message.
Yeah, it's so bizarre because like Rachel Lee Cook is legitimately a beautiful looking woman. Like she's very easy on the eyes. So what is this movie on where it's like here like I'm wearing glasses now. Like here ugly, beautiful, ugly, beautiful. I'm like, what are you on, movie? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, Rachel Lee Cook is beautiful. Like, are you not picking up what I'm putting down here? So, I don't know.
The '90s were something else.
That's for sure. But what have you all been watching lately? Let us know in the comments. But let's dive into some Punisher coverage. This is The Punisher, season 1, episode 4, called Resupply. Madani and Sam plan a delicate operation. Curtis tries to connect with Lewis, and Frank encourages Micro to get his hands dirty. So, Jacob, you saw this episode before I did because we were going to talk about it last week, but I didn't have the time to see it. But now that I have seen it, you've had a little more time to ruminate on it. Why don't you go first? What did you think?
Yeah, this episode disappointed me. It's the problem I have with it is I feel like you can tell they're stretching this show out too thin. It's got the Iron Fist syndrome all over again. And I hate to say that because there's so much potential for a good show, especially with John Bernthal as the Punisher. But no, they set up what they're going to try to do this team up between two unlikely sources who were both set up. But then they focus on either flashbacks, which we've already established in the last episode, or drawn out subplots that don't really need to be there. Like, I still don't understand why we're spending half of an episode on the soldier of the support group that has PTSD. I don't get why we're still focusing on this guy. It has nothing to do with what we're seeing in the Punisher show. And so every time it cuts back to this guy, it's like he's building this bunker in his yard because he's traumatized because he can't adjust to the real world. Yeah, I get it. It's trying to reflect on what some soldiers go through, but if you want to explore that, do it in your own story. Like, this is not fitting within the Punisher when the two characters aren't even they haven't even shared a scene together. So I don't get why it's in this show.
It feels like it's two completely different shows because you got Frank Castle doing his thing. I mean, fine, he is the namesake after all. But then you got this completely different thing, which like the CIA, or I believe it's the like you got the CIA like doing a completely different thing. And I'm like, if I wanted to watch a show about the CIA, like I'll watch a show about the CIA. It's like it's like if the Daredevil season one, like you had Daredevil doing his thing and then like you had like Foggy doing something far beyond like their law practice. It's like the Punisher show just feels completely distracted, like at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And I think if you had tightened this story up and focus on what you want to tell, I think this would be a really good show. There was potential in the first episode. But no, we're just focused on flashbacks and we're focused on subplots. And there's like no focus on this show. And it's starting to really frustrate me.
Yeah, and I still like John Bernthal. I still think that he is doing a very good job. And I think the actress playing Madani, Amber Rose Reva, I think she's doing a very good job. But like I said, I feel like the big problem, and you nailed it right on the head, Jacob. This movie has Iron Fist syndrome, which is something that you should not have, because that show was about as interesting as like this remote. Like it's not interesting in the slightest. I feel like there's potential here, but it's like being wasted. And I have been assured by friend of the channel, Aaron White, that this show does get good very soon. I don't want to doubt the man, but I'm getting real skittish at this point. I'm like, I wouldn't be watching this if I wasn't supposed to cover for this show. So it's getting very hard.
Yeah, very, very, very hard. It's been, I think at the time of recording this, I watched this. It's been a week since I've watched this, and I hardly remembered what happened in it.
Yeah, like I finished watching it like a few minutes ago, and even I'm like, you what? It's like I just like feel like connecting it, but I feel like I can't. But hopefully this show will get good soon, but I'm like this is almost like getting in the bottom tier of the Marvel Netflix shows, which is just like super duper boring and all that. But I pass it off to all of you. What did you all think of The Punisher season one, episode four? Let us know in the comments. But let's get to the main event for the evening. Jacob, this is the movie musical celebration. And you and I both love ourselves some movie musicals. And on this channel, you all know I love me some horror movies, that's for sure. But I love movie musicals just as much. And I was a theater kid throughout middle and high school, so these are very precious to me. So I don't know where you want to get the ball started, Jacob, but I think the first time I remember definitively saying to myself, I'm watching like a musical. I think for me, it was a movie called Newsies, starring a very, very, very young Christian Bale. And I've heard people say that Christian Bale can't sing, which I like, he's not the best, but I've heard far worse like singers in movie musicals. He is serviceable, and I think and Santa Fe still gives me chills to this very day. So the news of him not being able to sing is quite exaggerated. But what did you think of Newsies?
I think it's a solid movie. I don't have the same nostalgia for it like you. I was late in the game on this movie, but I've seen the movie twice, and I do think it's pretty good. What's crazy is it's directed by Kenny Ortega, who later went on to direct the High School Musical movies, and I feel like both movies have the same amount of cheese and the same amount of charm. And there's very well choreographed musical numbers. I like the historical spin that it has. Christian Bale, not the best singer, but it is very entertaining seeing him try. And him dancing like Michael Jackson, I thought it was absolutely hilarious. Come to find out, Kenny Ortega actually was responsible for some of Michael Jackson's choreography. So that's the connection there. Uh,
Including for a little music video called Thriller. Some of you may have seen that little masterpiece.
yep. So I think it's a really solid movie. There are some pretty good songs in it, which are I think Alan Menken did the songs for Newsies, and he crafted some really good ones in that film.
I mean, Alan Menken just does not miss. I think we both can agree with each other on that.
Oh, absolutely.
But another one that I really like connected with was like a staple of like a young theater kids like theater diet. Oklahoma. You're not a theater kid if you're not at least one performance of Oklahoma in your lifetime. But the version of Oklahoma that I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the one from the 50s, which I do think is good. I want to bring to your attention, Jacob, the one that starred Hugh Jackman, and not just a Hugh Jackman, but a Hugh Jackman a year before he was in a little movie called X-Men. This is pretty much his debut right here, and this was filmed
Wow.
on the West End in London, and of course he crushes it. So Jacob, have you seen this?
I haven't seen that version. I've seen the 1950s one. I didn't really connect with it. It's got some good songs in it though, like "Oh What a Beautiful Morning." That's a pretty good song. But I didn't know Hugh Jackman was in a version.
Yeah, like I said, this was on London's West End, and literally a year after this film version was released, he was like in a little movie called X-Men, and the rest is literally history. Like he's
Yeah.
still playing the role to this very day. We'll talk about that a little later when that movie comes out.
Oh
But
yeah. I'll tell you. I'll share one of mine. Obviously, I think some of the earliest like musical experiences I probably had as a kid was probably some of the Disney animated films, which had musical elements in there. But I guess maybe the first full blown musical that I ever fell in love with was Mary Poppins, which, in my opinion, is the best live action film in the Disney library. And I would say it's still my favorite movie musical to this day because of the great connection I have with this movie. Some incredible songs from the Sherman Brothers. Sherman Brothers are some of my favorite songwriters in movie history. Like they craft earworm after earworm after earworm with songs like Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, Chim Chim Cheree, Step in Time, Spoonful of Sugar, you name it. This was the movie. I think Julie Andrews was a stage actress before Mary Poppins, but this was her first big movie role. And she won an Academy Award for playing Mary Poppins, and it was very well deserved. This movie has great choreography in it. You also got Dick Van Dyke, who's a true showstopper in this film as Bert the Chimney Sweep. And it's a great family story, too. It's a really good package, all in one. It's got heart, it's got comedy, it's got music, all around. One of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stone cold classic. It's one of my personal favorites as well. One part of that movie that does not get talked about. First of all, I want to shout out, let me find her name because she actually recently passed away, and I want to get her name right
You're talking
because
about Glynis Johns, who played Mrs. Banks.
yeah, because she
Yeah,
was
she was a
fantastic.
100 years old. And I didn't
Incredible.
realize that she lived that long until she passed away. I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, she was incredible in that role, but I want to shout out David Tomlinson, who plays George Banks. He
Oh yeah,
crushed it. I mean, that actor, now I just clicked away from the screen. Let me get his name.
David
It's
Tomlinson.
David Tomlinson. Thank you. David Tomlinson is pretty much good in anything that he was in, but even in this one, he was great. Like the scene in which he knows he's going to get fired from his job and he just walks silently to his bank. Like for a kids movie, that was surprisingly mature and like how they handled that.
Yeah, and it's got some, and there's like great emotional resonance to it too, as you see him walking and he's reflecting upon the things that he's overlooked with his kids at the same time. And then you realize, the purpose of the movie was not Mary Poppins coming to help the kids, but to help the family, particularly the father.
Yeah, exactly. But moving from one Julie Andrews movie to another Julie Andrews movie, let's talk about The Sound of Music for a little bit because this movie rocks. I don't care who you are, this movie absolutely rocks still to this day.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's funny because I've seen some of the other Rodgers and Hammerstein musical movies, and yeah, those guys are talented, but I struggle to connect with some of these other movies like Oklahoma, State Fair. I watched one time, and I could not get into that one, and I wasn't a big fan of Carousel either. But the Sound of Music is absolutely amazing. It's like Julie Andrews was like 2 for 2 because she did that movie right after Mary Poppins, and this movie is just as fantastic. I love, especially the cinematography in this movie that they shot on location in Austria, and it's a really, really great story. Where she goes and helps these kids, restores this family, restores ties with their father, who's kind of distant, and then helps the family flee from Nazis during World War II. I think it's a really cool story. Some iconic songs, "Do Re Mi," "My Favorite Things," "The Lonely Goat," the title song. "Edelweiss" is a beautiful song. I mean, you got some great show-stopping songs in this movie, and you got Julie Andrews, Christopher Plummer. It's very talented cast. Excellent movie.
It still gives me chills, the Climb Every Mountain song from The Nun. I'm like, from Mother
Oh,
Superior, I'm just like, bro, that is so good. Like how
that
she,
lady I read was like, I think she was like 70, 80 years old, and she was hitting notes that well. I'm like, wow, she had some good pipes for an old woman.
she must have been in opera. That's the only way that I can circle that square because she crushed it. And like the opening of the hills are alive with the sound of music. That opening has got to be in like the conversation for the greatest film openings of all time.
Oh yeah.
Just the cinematography, like you mentioned, Julie Andrews' voice, just the song in general. It's beautiful.
Yeah, this movie is great. I haven't seen it in so long. I need to rewatch it again. It's an amazing movie. Another great movie, I think that's worthy of discussion. One of my personal favorites. This came out during the golden age of movie musicals in the 1950s, and this is like neck and neck with Mary Poppins for me, and that is Singing in the Rain, released in 1951, starring Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds. And this movie was, I would kind of consider it kind of like the La La Land of the 1950s almost, if you think about it, because it's about people struggling to get in show business, kind of like La La Land, and there's a little bit of a romance in there. But this one takes the angle. It's coming out during the transition from silent to talkies and kind of like the struggle actors had adjusting to that period. Uh, but the movie does it in such a tongue-in-cheek way. I love the slapstick comedy in this movie. And I even say if you don't like musicals, it's still a great comedy and it's worth watching for the comedy alone. And if you like the comedy, you might like some of the musical numbers that play into the comedy, like Donald O'Connor doing the make him laugh scene where he I think was doing a lot of crazy stunts and pratfalls that I've seen the film multiple times, and it still gets a great laugh out of me. Some of the stunt work and some of the stuff he does in that. Of course, the movie is best known for the "Singing in the Rain" song, where Gene Kelly is literally singing in the rain. And here's the thing that blows my mind: Gene Kelly had a fever when they shot that scene, 102 degrees.
Yeah.
He could have called off and said, "Hey, I'm sick. I can't do this scene. Can we do it another day?" But nope, he was like, "You know what? I think I can do a little dance number to try to bring the fever down." And he did, provided one of the best dance sequences of all time. I've watched the scene and it's well, one, the song is catchy, but then you get to the dance choreography and he's like jumping around and moving around. I'm like, wow, that's a true professional right there. This is an amazing movie.
That song takes on a whole different meaning when you watch A Clockwork Orange.
Oh, oh no, that it doesn't ruin the song for me, but yeah, that's a scene I can't revisit anytime soon.
It was a choice. I think we can leave it at that. But yeah, Singing in the Rain, I have no complaints about that movie. It's one of the greatest of all time, directed by Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly. Like they both did great. Gene Kelly, like you mentioned, just did great. Donald O'Connor was great as Cosmo as well. I don't think people give him his flowers enough. I thought he was great. And then Debbie Reynolds, I believe you mentioned her, but if you didn't, then I'll do it because I thought she was fantastic as well. The ending scene where Lena Lamont is like just like doing the whole lip sync thing and they just completely clown on her. That's like the greatest revenge scene in movie history, right?
Yeah, it's so funny too.
Because Cosmo's in up there, he's like, I'm laughing at Cloud. I'm like, just like, this woman, Lena Lamont, did not deserve this. But she,
Shout out to I think it's Gene Hagen who plays Lena Lamont, who absolutely crushed it in that role.
but keeping in the same, like, not the same decade, but the same era, I guess. Let's talk about more of a tragic musical. Let's talk about West Side Story because the more I watch this movie, the more like just the more it just breaks my heart. Like even though like you know what's going to happen, you're still given hope and then that hope just gets completely flushed down the drain. Like Robert Wise not only directed this, but he also directed Sound of Music. He's got to be in the conversation for like greatest musical director of all time.
Yeah, he definitely has, but he definitely you can talk about that for sure. And plus all the Oscars that movie won as well: Best Picture, Best Director. I think some of the actors like Rita Moreno, I know, won Best Supporting Actress. That is it is an incredible movie. Some great songs. It did such a great job of readapting Romeo and Juliet, getting like putting like a 21st century spin on it, and I would say putting a more tragic underbelly to it by putting it dealing with street gangs and racism in there as well. I think it's a really powerful movie, and also I gotta mention Steven Spielberg did the remake of West Side Story that came out a couple of years ago, and I dare say it's just as good as the original film. They're neck and neck for me. Both are great adaptations of a great musical.
I have not seen that one, not for any reason other than I it came out during 2020 when things weren't open and I just never got around to see it, but I think I'm at a point now where I should see it at this point because it's been long enough. But let's kind of skewing a little modern. I want to toss a modern musical to you. I mean, 2012 is still technically modern, or like maybe,
Yeah.
but the 2012 version of Les Miserables is one that I frequently defend, and people be like, Amanda Seyfried can't sing, Hugh Jackman can't sing, Russell Crowe can't sing. Okay, he can't, but there's still a lot of other good performances here, and this movie never fails to make me cry, especially at the end. So, like, I get why people wouldn't like this movie, but I will die on the hill that Les Miserables, the 2012 version, is a great movie.
I agree with you. That version of Les Miserables, that's the only version of Les Mis I've seen, but it's a terrific film, especially the actors they got to play these characters. Hugh Jackman, if I'm not mistaken, he either was nominated for an Oscar or he won, but he did an amazing job. I know Anne Hathaway won specifically for that "I Dreamed a Dream" scene. That scene breaks me every time I watch
Deserved.
it. It
Very
is,
deserved for her. For her
oh,
for sure.
that is a gut wrenching scene. It's uh, it's weird saying beautiful because it's such a depressing moment of the movie, but she absolutely crushed it. I don't even mind Russell Crowe in the film. Like his singing's not the best, but he has this really cool baritone range that I feel like fits his character. So I don't mind him being in the film. I think it does a good job of telling its story, and there's a lot of powerful stuff in that film, especially the themes of redemption and forgiveness.
The scene where Jean Valjean gets forgiven by the priest and like is given all of like the candlesticks and the gold and stuff, and he just doesn't know how to take it, but then he like sings it out, and then he rips up his pardon papers and he just throws it to the wind. That's It's overused now, but I don't care. That's cinema. That is cinema right that moment right there.
Yeah, it's a wonderful movie. Another musical that I'm gonna share that's one of my favorites. Um, I briefly talked about it already when I was comparing it earlier, but if we're going more contemporary, this is one of my favorite musicals. Came out in 2016 and it's called La La Land, directed by Damien Chazelle. The movie that a lot of people thought was going to win Best Picture that year. And for 2 seconds, it was deemed the winner
I
at
was gonna
the
say it
Academy
almost
Awards.
did. It almost
Uh,
did.
it almost did, but then it turned out the wrong envelope was read, and Moonlight was the winner. But of the two movies, I think La La Land personally is the better film. I think this movie does a great job of diving into, I think, the struggles people have trying to make it into the industry. I think the film also does a good job of showing the determination that some artists go through to follow their dreams and some of the sacrifices that they make along the way as well. I think the love story in this film is absolutely beautiful. I love the chemistry between Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. Some really good songs in this film. I love the love letter to jazz that's in this film. I'm not a big jazz person, but I appreciate the art form, and this movie does jazz very well. So you got Another Day of Sun, which is excellent. You got Somewhere in the Crowd. You have, I think it's called A Lovely Night, which is the one where Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone are dancing on the road while the sun's rising. That scene's pretty cool. But to me, the standout is actually, it's called The Fools Who Dream. The audit when Emma Stone makes her big audition, and she gives this monologue which turns into a song. And I think it was done in one take. And to me, that sealed the deal on why this is a great modern day musical. And then even the ending, which some have debated about, the fate of these characters, I'm like, I thought it was believable. I thought it was realistic considering the themes of the sacrifices characters make to fulfill their dreams. I thought it was a well done movie, some great cinematography, and my opinion was I didn't see Whiplash, but of the Damien Chazelle films I've seen, I would say this is the cream of the crop.
All right, next watch along we are watching Whiplash, you and I. You're
Oh
not.
wait, no wait, no, actually no. I got my titles wrong. I've seen Whiplash. I meant to say Babylon.
We're still watching Babylon because you need to watch that. But yeah. La La Land is phenomenal. Like I mean, Damien Chazelle for me is 4 for 4. Like Whiplash, La La Land, First Man, and Babylon. He has yet to make a bad movie for me. And La La Land just, I sometimes go back to that soundtrack and just marvel at how beautiful it is. Like both versions of City of Stars, where one it's just Ryan Gosling by himself, and then the other version where it's him and Emma Stone. Like just both versions are just beautiful.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful movie in general. This I think when I rewatched when I no when I watched the film in theaters when it came out, I think it kind of like reconfirmed why I love musicals in the first place. Where you can tell your stories, but when the music can enrich these stories and help convey themes and emotions that wouldn't necessarily be as compelling when it's just traditional acting. When you can rely on powerful songs to convey the story, it's real movie magic right there.
That's for sure. Like you brought up someone in the crowd, like the build up to that, and then like when the downbeat hits, like there's someone in the crowd, and like the ladies are like dancing to their cars. I'm like, that's magic right there. I love that scene so much. And like you touched on earlier, I think we could do like a sister celebration of like Disney musicals because that's a whole nother like subgenre that we could dedicate an entire episode to, and I think that we will.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. This is one of the more depressing ones considering its story, but Fiddler on the Roof is a personal favorite of mine. It's a very sad story, especially with how these characters end up. But man, talk about like a movie that just is like agony and ecstasy all rolled into one. You got like the upbeat ones like If I Were a Rich Man and To Life, but then you got the sad ones like uh uh, like the dang Far From the Home I Love. Just wow. It's like every emotion and it all works.
Yeah, this is a terrific movie. I've only seen the movie twice, but the more I've watched the film, the more I've grown to really appreciate it. It's kind of a movie of two halves because the first movie is a little bit more lighthearted and goofy, and then it takes a tonal shift in the second half where it deals with like prejudice, anti-Semitism, some of the stuff going on at that time. And yet the movie still functions as a compelling character drama of a man stuck on tradition and learning to deal with different cultural clashes. And I thought it was very well done. Topol as the main guy, Teve, is incredible. He did a great job in this movie. He captured every pain and emotion between the songs he sings, the character he plays. If I Were a Rich Man is one of my favorite musical scenes ever because the monologue that he gives through song combined with the John Williams score. And yes, the John Williams, he did Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Harry Potter, Superman, Jaws, all that good stuff. Before he did all those, John Williams did Fiddler on the Roof. And then when you mix John Williams with Topol singing, it's an amazing moment of movie. Uh, Sunrise Sunset is another really good song as well. The funny thing, the first time I heard that song, they spoofed it in The Lion King 1.5, and I was like, "This is a random musical number in this movie." And then come to find out it was originally in a more serious film called Fiddler on the Roof, and I'm like, "Yeah, that makes a lot of sense."
You know, I legit forget that there was a Lion King 1.5, not gonna lie.
But yeah, that's one of the better direct-to-video Disney sequels.
Yeah, but like I said, Fiddler on the Roof is one of my all-time favorite, not just musicals, but movies, period. And I'm glad that I remembered to bring it up.
Yeah, I think maybe the last musical I'm going to bring up for this discussion. Um, there's a lot I can talk about, but okay, I know which one I'm going to do. This is one I have been enamored with since I got into more classic movies. And it's a movie that came out in 1962 called The Music Man. The movie stars Robert Preston as Harold Hill, who is a con man who ends up in River City, Iowa, and his intent is to con the whole town into giving him money to form an all boys marching band. And so he strives to get uniforms, instruments, but because he's a con man, he doesn't know how to carry a tune. He doesn't know how to lead a band. His plan is to get him all the stuff ready to form this band, and then just leave off with the money and scam the next town, pretty much. And essentially, his he ends up gaining a heart of gold the more he stays in this town, and he ends up falling in love with the local librarian Marion, played by Shirley Jones. I think this movie is absolutely delightful. It's another great redemption story where you have this very unlikable person at first who gains a heart of gold by the end, and you buy the redemption in the story. I think one, because Robert Preston is so charismatic in the role, even when he's doing despicable things, you enjoy what he's doing. And the musical numbers that he provides are some of the catchiest songs in musical history. 76 trombones. You got Trouble. You got the Wells Fargo wagon, which is terrific. Shirley Jones has an incredible voice and sings some of the great ballads like Good Night, My Someone and Till There Was You. You even got Buddy Hackett, who's a great supporting player in this film and has some show stopping moments like the very silly Shapoopy. It's a goofy song, yes, but it's awesome. And then even Ron Howard, who was big on the Andy Griffith Show at the time before he directed movies, uh, one of his early movie roles was in this movie, and he's pretty memorable in this movie as well. Uh, this is one of my favorite musicals. It's one of the most infectious, upbeat musicals of all time. All the songs in this movie are great. I love the story, and I think it's one that gets overlooked in today's standards, but I really love it.
I must say this is one of my musical blind spots. I have never seen The Music Man.
Wow.
I know of the story, I know what happens in it. I just have not seen it cover to cover. And I know I should see it. I've heard that there's that and there's a remake starring Matthew Broderick, which I didn't find until my research just now. And I don't know how to feel about that. Disney made it, of all people.
Okay. Yeah, that's a weird one for sure.
You should
But
do
no,
that for celebrating Disney, Jake.
I could if I can find it. I don't think it's on Disney Plus. I did recently cover Inspector Gadget for celebrating Disney with Matthew Broderick. That film was atrocious.
Yeah, you were not a fan of that one.
But yeah, yeah, stick to the original Music Man with Robert Preston. That is one of the best musicals you'll ever see.
Yeah, but one last one for me before we close things out. And folks, we could do like another one. Actually, let's put a pin in let's do another musical celebration down the line. We got the animation celebration, the action celebration. Let's add the musical celebration to the lineup. And
Oh,
let's do it like once a quarter. Like
sounds
like
good to
what
me.
like what we do with the other two. Because like I said, I think we could do like there's a lot of mileage for musicals in my opinion. But I want to close things out with one that I don't think would necessarily be considered a musical, but I think definitely qualifies. And now that I think time has gone by, I wanted to get your opinion, Jacob, on this one. The Greatest Showman. What did you think?
I think it's a good movie. I do consider it a musical. Uh, it's not one of my favorite musicals. I think story wise, it does follow a generic template, like put on a show type musical that you see in a lot of the classic movies. I get why people aren't a fan of this movie. Some have criticized it for the historical inaccuracies. I get that, but when looking at it on its own terms, I still think it's a fun movie. What makes the movie awesome are the musical numbers. Hugh Jackman is terrific as expected. You got Zach Efron, who's good in the films, and Zendaya. You got um, Michelle Williams might be the weak spot of the movie. Her musical number is not the best, but she's fine in the film. Rebecca Ferguson's in the film. I know she doesn't do her own singing; they dubbed her voice, but the song her character sings, "Never Enough," is absolutely terrific. Uh, I do like a lot of the songs in this movie. The Greatest Show, This Is Me's like was like the big hit that came from this movie, and I haven't heard the song on the radio because they pushed it to radio, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic song that resonates with a lot of people. From Now On is a great song. Rewrite the Stars is this really cool little love song in the film. I think there's a lot of good stuff in this movie musically, and yeah, the movie's kind of flawed story wise. Like it's pretty predictable and it follows a template, but the movie is still worth watching, in my opinion, for some really awesome musical numbers in it.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, they like brushed over P.T. Barnum and some of the things he did. Yeah, so does every movie biopic. Like, are you new to this? And it's a musical. Like, what do you want? So
I think to address maybe the criticism people have with the film, I think the movie does address that P.T. Barnum, even in the movie, was not the most likable person at first. He was kind of a con man. But I think the movie does kind of dwell on that, and it also kind of examines that by the end, but does then like the musical, like kind of like the fun, check the boxes 21st century musical route. And I didn't mind that. I think I think Hugh Jackman even described he viewed the film as more of a historical fantasy since they took a lot of liberties with the story. And I mean that happens. That Anastasia movie that came out in the 90s that Don Bluth animated, there was historical inaccuracies in that movie, but you don't see people crap on that film too much. People love that movie. So The Greatest Showman, it's no different than that.
yeah, my point exactly. But let's leave it off there. I pass it off to all of you. What are some of your favorite movie musicals? Let us know in the comments. We'll definitely be doing a part two to this because I think there is a lot of mileage in this. But Jacob, thank you so much for doing this. It looks like the technology held up on us this time, and I'm grateful for that. Your channel's linked in the description. Tell the people what you got coming up.
Coming up, I did my celebrating Disney live stream last week. So after I upload a live stream, I will take the movies I reviewed in the live stream and re-edit and re-upload them into standalone videos. So this week will be a celebrating Disney review on Bedknobs and Broomsticks, another great Disney musical, which we could have talked about in the musical celebration. We'll save that for next week or next time because that's a good movie. Uh, Also, at the time this video drops on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, today, when this drops, I'll be doing this month's Reacting to Hot Takes live stream. Henry Mockingbird and Epictastic Joshua will be joining, and we'll be reacting to the Blockbuster Busters review of Robots. So be on the lookout for that. And then also, I got some other things I got Saturday. I got two streams Saturday. The 11 a.m. Eastern time, I'll be joining Nick from the channel Townsend 90 no, not 909, Townsend 505, Jason Neal Millennial. Will be ranking the films of the Disney Golden Age. And then Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be I'll be joined with Nick Scott from Sound Lab Studios, Jason Neal Millennial will be reviewing. Since I'm doing more album reviews on the channel, we'll be reviewing the Beatles' second album titled "With the Beatles," and that's some of the stuff I've got this week.
Jacob's also reviewing all of Michael Jackson's albums on his community posts, and I recommend you check out all of those. The link will be in the description for that. As for this channel, the road to Godzilla vs. Kong to Godzilla X Kong, excuse me, continues apace with the coming up in the closure of the Showa era, thank God. Small Talk every Tuesday, the 1999 Project every Friday, and of course, Life in the Movies every Wednesday. So be on the lookout for all of that. But for Jacob Martin, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you all in the next one. Y'all take care.